is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
What is good, everyone? Welcome into another episode of Ain't No Seats. We're here to break down Kansas versus Oklahoma State this week, and I'm super excited about this guest. I think most of you that pay attention to just sports in the area or KCSN as a whole, Tucker Franklin, one of my good friends, told me to have this guy on, Jon Walker. He covers everything Oklahoma State down at the Stillwater News Press. Jon, thank you so much for coming on. And how are you feeling about this Oklahoma State team after a big win on Friday?
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me on, and shout out to Tucker, obviously. But yeah, they feel pretty good in Stillwater, as you can imagine. Back-to-back losses, entering the bye, and got revenge in a way on a K-State team that handed them the worst loss of the Mike Gundy era in Manhattan a year ago. So they feel pretty good around here. I personally still think there's a few questions that I'm sure we'll dive into, particularly about OSU's offense. So we'll obviously get a good look at what the Pokes bring to the table in Boone Pickens Stadium this Saturday.
Yeah, so obviously KU fans know how good K-State is. They won the Big 12 championship last year against a team that played in the Big 12 championship, a team that played in the national championship, TCU. So KU fans are obviously a little worried. I mean, Oklahoma State won that game pretty handily. I know K-State kind of made it tight at the end, but do you think it was a mixture of K-State just kind of having an off night offensively, or do you think Oklahoma State did stuff defensively to kind of slow down that K-State offense?
Maybe a little bit of both. They have a first-year defensive coordinator, came from Gannon University, a Division II school. OSU does. And so I think, he got the first 4 weeks to kind of see what maybe their defensive identity was. And he had a whole, almost 2 weeks to prepare for K-State. So I think a little bit of that. But I'd be foolish to say that K-State didn't have an off night offensively, right? Like Will Howard, less than 200 yards, completed less than half his passes, 3 picks. I mean, that is not the Will Howard we saw a year ago at all. And if that was Will Howard from a year ago, the Wildcats are probably not Big 12 champs. So I think it was probably a little bit of both.
Yeah. So I feel like there were some rumors going around in Stillwater that things weren't great in the locker room just after the losing streak. They obviously lose to South Alabama. They lose in Ames. Do you feel a big shift around the team and in the locker room with those guys after a big win like that?
Yeah, I think so. They kind of skated by through the first couple of weeks, opened the season with like a 30 or a 27-13 win over Central Arkansas, went to Tempe, won at Arizona State, a team that was starting Jaden Rashada, a true freshman, but they were still kind of like giddy. Things were still on track. And then they had the South Alabama loss, and things were pretty somber that night in the post-game presser. Gundy, players, you kind of name it. Kind of the same way in Ames. Just a brutal way to one, have your worst non-conference loss in, I don't know, I think it's like since 91, to obviously a group of 5 school. And then to lose your conference opener in Ames against a team that had scored 7 points the week before on Ohio. They were pretty brutal there for a couple of weeks. And then we had a pretty eventful off week too. Some things happened personnel wise. But now you could tell that there was an energy. There was a certain type of expectation, maybe after that K-State game of like, oh, we are still a team that has, Mike Gundy, who's been to, I think, like 17 straight bowls or something like that. We still have that guy as our head coach. We're still fine. Everything we want's in front of us. That's kind of what the energy seemed like this week.
Yeah, so the quarterback situation was obviously weird there for a little bit.
Yeah.
We talked about it the first few weeks. It was Rangel, it was Gundy, it was Bowman. And then they lose, I think it was 33-7 against South Alabama. And what made them go with Alan Bowman after that? What did they see with him to make him the starter going forward?
Yeah, so I'd asked Mike Gundy that on Monday, kind of after the press conference, and he had just talked about Alan Bowman and his experience, he was at Texas Tech for 3 years, was at Michigan for 2 years. His experience, Mike Gundy felt like, gave the Pokes the best chance to win because he can get to the line, make a read quicker than, maybe Gunnar Gundy can as a redshirt sophomore. And certainly Garrett Rangel as a redshirt freshman. The things that Alan Bowman has seen compared to those two guys put together is, gives him the advantage in that front. And so they really thought that their best chance to move the ball. Now they lost their top receiver. I don't know how many people in Lawrence know that, but the John Stribling, Washington State transfer, he's done for the year. So they kind of figured their best course of action moving forward, it seems, is to get the ball out of Allen's hands quickly. He's not the most mobile guy, has enough mobility to maybe maneuver out of a situation, but he's certainly not Jason Bean. He's certainly not Jalen Daniels. So that's kind of why they led to him, the experience, and the things that come with that experience in return.
Yeah. I was going to actually ask you to just talk about his game a little bit because I've watched him the last few weeks and the numbers haven't been crazy impressive,
Right.
But being an experienced quarterback in college football is massive, especially at home where you're comfortable. But what are your takes from his two performances the last 2 weeks, and how are the fans as a whole feeling about Alan Bowman as a starter going forward?
Yeah, so I think that South Alabama game is probably, depending on how this season goes, I think is going to be a pretty good point to measure this season. And so you talk about that South Alabama game, he got the start as a part. That was the last game we saw the 3 quarterback rotation, and threw a pick, was not playing well, and fans booed him off the field at home, which is that can be a tough spot to be in. Especially when you have 2 other guys who they're we could just put them in, essentially. And so, but since then, he gets the start in Ames. We found out maybe an hour before kickoff that he was going to, go the whole way, making him the first quarterback this season to do that at OSU. And he played decently well in that game, wanted to take shots accordingly. But, he was the first person to tell you after the game, his first of 2 interceptions in that one, was a momentum killer. They had the ball coming out of half, an opportunity to take a lead, boom, throws a pick. Kind of an errant throw on his part. He admitted that. And then at the end, was trying to make a play on 4th down and throw a pick. But he, credit to Alan Bowman, he had them in that game late, that's for sure. And then coming out of the bye against K-State, his numbers, as you kind of said, aren't going to jump out of the box score. That just doesn't seem to be the Alan Bowman MO. But he was 12 of 22 for $199 at half against K-State. And you were like, whoa, where's this guy been? And I think he ended up with only 230 or something like that. They turned him into more of a game manager in the second half since they were protecting that lead, obviously. But, I think he is probably the best course of action for this offense moving forward. As he kind of showcased, they'll have another year to get experience under Gunnar Gundy or Garrett Rangel. They've got a pretty salty freshman kind of on deck in Zane Flores. He was the Gatorade Nebraska Player of the Year last year. So they'll kind of ride Alan Bowman in what's likely his final year of college football and kind of get some of those other guys experience. But yeah, I think that he's probably stylistically their best course of action moving forward.
Yeah, so I guess from a KU fans listener standpoint with Bowman, can you kind of just expect them obviously to get the ground game going with Ollie Gordon and then just quick hitters all game really from Alan Bowman? Is he a guy that's going to take deep shots?
They love to try to be balanced. Now, try is the big part of that. They've had some things where maybe they've got turned one-dimensional. They've been down in games, and they've really just been kind of turned, as I said, one-dimensional in some instances. And so they love to try and get the run game going. They've struggled to at times. And I think, the running backs, the offensive line, Gundy would probably be the first people to say it, But I think against K-State, we saw what they can be when they're balanced. But that seems to be the identity of the offense. Try to establish the run with Ollie Gordon. In certain situations, they'll use, Elijah Collins and Jaden Nixon, kind of their 2 and 3 at running back. But they'd love to get Ollie Gordon going. And in turn, I kind of mentioned that in Ames, Alan Bowman took shots accordingly, and they called shots accordingly. It was like, okay, we're gonna suck you up to the line of scrimmage. Boom, we're taking a shot. Now again, that's probably impacted a little bit with the loss of their top receiver, but they showed last week against K-State that they're still willing to take a shot if it presents itself. But yeah, probably try and get the run game going. A lot of dink and dunk, and then probably just regular script wise in those second and short situations. Maybe after 3 straight handoffs, we're going to run play action and lob it up.
Yeah, so let's talk about Ollie Gordon a little bit, because I feel like he started off the year a little slow. The offense was a little sluggish, and then obviously the last 2 weeks, he's really exploded, and we talked about the pass game. It hasn't been crazy explosive, I think. No. Bowman's been around 50% completion percentage. So yeah, Ollie Gordon, 18 for 121 at Iowa State, and then 21 for 136 against K-State, who usually has a really solid defense, obviously. So what do you think has changed, I guess, up front for Oklahoma State and in the on the ground game? And should KU be pretty worried about a guy like Ollie Gordon on Saturday?
Yeah, if I'd kind of say this about any team in the Big 12 facing Oklahoma State. If Ollie Gordon gets going, he's certainly a weapon that Oklahoma State is going to use if he's the hot hand. And on that kind of same note, I think that's why Ollie Gordon has kind of had this emergence. They rotated running backs as much as they rotated quarterbacks throughout the first couple of games. That second half at Arizona State, I think they rushed the ball for like 116 in the second half. He had like 45 of those on the opening drive out of the locker room. And it was like, okay, this is, maybe this is the beginning of the end of the running back rotation. And yeah, he's kind of had the keys to the vehicle the past couple of games. So yeah, they definitely want to get, they've been trying to more get Ollie Gordon going. In terms of how they've been able to do that, obviously on his part, not having the ability to be yanked immediately after, maybe a small mistake. You miss a cutback, you do whatever. Boom, we got 2 running backs we're pulling you for. That hasn't really seemed to be the case over the past couple of games. And they changed some things. Mike Gundy hasn't revealed quite what. But they changed some things schematically along the offensive line, along with some personnel around. So that's kind of why they've been able to hang their hat on the run the past couple of weeks, or at least be better than they were, certainly against Central Arkansas and against Arizona State and against South Alabama. Yeah,
because from a KU standpoint, I've never disrespected Alan Bowman. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, like you said.
Right.
He's been around. He's played in the Big 12. He transferred to Michigan, who's a huge program. But from my standpoint, I feel like, why wouldn't teams just start to stack the box a little bit against Oklahoma State? Obviously try to slow down Ollie Gordon, but make Bowman try to beat you. Is that things teams have tried to do the last few weeks, or is that a thing that worries you too?
No, that's if anybody could go back and watch the South Alabama game, that's how they did it. And South Alabama was pretty open about that after they came to Stillwater and upset OSU. They said, we knew that if we could shut their run game, we were going to turn them one-dimensional. And if we did that, now, granted, this is when OSU was still rotating quarterbacks, so I'm not sure if it'd be any different nowadays. But they knew that the weakness of OSU's team, of OSU's offense in a way, was to force whoever was in at quarterback, Alan Bowman, moving forward to beat them. And it didn't work that night. Iowa State tried it a little bit, but I think OSU protected really well in Ames. And in the same kind of stayed true against K-State last week. But yeah, I mean, teams that want to stack the box and force OSU to throw it over you, they've had success so far.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So before we talk about the offense more, I wanted to talk about one of our sponsors, Home Field Apparel. We love them. Oklahoma State fans that are listening to your boy John talk, they have elite stuff for you guys too. They have elite designs for every school in the country. Really, really nice material. Like I said, we love them. They always take care of us. We've loved Home Field before they even sponsored us, and we have a bunch of their stuff. We make our families spend money on their stuff, and we get our friends on their stuff. So we love Home Field. You can still get 15% off a discount by using No Seats 23. Thank you, Home Field, as always. You guys should go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. Go get you some Oklahoma State gear or whatever school you like. If you're listening to this game for like a betting preview from another school or something, go check out those designs. They're elite. Go check them out. Homefieldapparel.com. No seats 23, 15% off at checkout.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
So you talked about the blow in the receiver room, obviously, and I wanted to talk about the other two guys, Jaden Bray and Brennan Presley. I think a lot of people are obviously familiar with Presley. He's been in the Big 12 for a while, put up numbers. He's dangerous in the return game. So can you kind of talk about those weapons and what will they be tough for Kansas's secondary to slow down?
Yeah, Jaden Bray's a guy who's still trying to find himself in a way. You know, he's a redshirt sophomore now, so his third year at OSU. Played quite a bit as a true freshman. Last year, really battled some injury things. Has a pretty nice scar along the outside of his thumb on his left hand, I believe, or I guess the inside of his thumb that would be on his left hand, where he had surgery. Injured that in training camp last year. Caught a pass in one of their first few games, re-aggravated it, came back, re-aggravated it, and was done for the rest of the year. You know, he's still trying to find his footing. But he's shown that in the absence of, you know, Dejon Stribling, you know, he's a target that, you know, OSU wants to try and get the ball to. Brennan Presley, I mean, is, you know, for a few years, it seemed like Brennan Presley was, you know, maybe OSU's entire offense, or at least it revolved around him, you know, using him in motion to sway a defense which way. And that's really what the Cowboys have returned to. They wanted to get Brennan Presley the ball. I'd imagine Kansas is going to do this because why would you not? They've taken him away. So in return, you know, Casey Dunn, OSU's offensive coordinator, has implemented more motion to try and you know, again, use him to sway a defense out of position in some instances. But that's kind of been a recurring theme throughout the first half of the season at OSU. I couldn't tell you how many times I've heard, you know, we need to get Brennan the ball more. Brennan needs more touches. So maybe that'll be a point of emphasis this week, especially with again, Dejon Stribling being out for the season. But another guy to watch for is Rashad Owens. Number 10. They've taken quite a few deep shots to him. He's been with the program for a few years. Anybody who doesn't follow OSU too closely, they had this weird position called a cowboy back for like years, and it was like a hybrid tight end fullback essentially. Now they've kind of switched to tight ends and fullbacks separate, but point being, long meandering way to say, Rashad Owens was a receiver when he first got to OSU, was a cowboy back, and now he's transitioned back to receiver. As you can imagine, I mean, he's massive now for a receiver's sake because he had to play, you know, cowboy back. He was in the trenches in a way. And so they've loved to go to him in kind of downfield situations because, you know, big body receiver, let him go up and get it. That's what they had in Stribling, lost that. And now in some instances, they tried to replicate it with Rashad Owens.
Yeah, so before we really tap into the defense, I kind of wanted to bring this up before I forget it. I talked about how KU or other teams should just stack the box, get Ollie Gordon, make Bowman beat them. Do you think Oklahoma State fans are kind of looking at Kansas that same way, where Jason Bean threw the ball last week, 90 yards, 8 for 12, and KU ran for 399. So do you think Oklahoma State fans are kind of looking at KU the same way, where you just let Jason Bean beat you and see what happens?
Yeah. I mean, for OSU's sake, you know, Jason Bean had a pretty good game against them last year, and it didn't really have to do with anything he did through the air, right? Like he was still good in that game. Let's see, I've got Bean last year carried the ball, or has carried the ball against OSU this year, 19 times, 91 yards, I think, is what I had written down. That's probably wrong. Who knows? But
this year or against Oklahoma State last year?
This year.
Yeah,
total.
Yeah. That's...
So, you know, he's kind of shown that he's wanted to run appropriately though. Like that's the thing about Kansas. They're not going to just like aimlessly run. right? Like they've schemed too well. The coordinators have been with Lance Leipold for this long. They kind of know exactly what they want. They're all on the same page, and they've done it really well. But the number 6 rushing offense in the country, the odds would probably tell you if you can try and do anything you can to slow down the run, whether that be Jalen Daniels or Jason Beans in there, you want to stack the box. The problem, I think, on OSU's end, they switched to a 3-3-5 this year. And they've shown some forefront. And obviously the point of the 3-3-5 is to kind of create some confusion on the defense. But how can you manufacture ways or at least simulate pressure as if you're going to stack the box? Because I think that's, if you're going to hang in there with Kansas, I think we saw Texas do it a little bit. You got to get pressure in the backfield. Otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah. We talked about Oklahoma State at the beginning of the week, and we kind of talked about how they've had a badass defense now for a while. Last year, the last few years. Do you think their defense has dropped off a lot, or do you think they're trying to figure things out? Because I'm just confused about this defense. There's been weeks where they get gashed on the ground, and then they go to Iowa State and they stuff the run, but Rocco Becht was kind of good through the air. So I'm just kind of confused on this defense. Do you think they have the personnel to be a good defense, or do you think it's just trying to gel together still?
So they've got some, I think it's a little bit of both. They're developing guys. There is no question about that, specifically in the back end. Like if I was kind of looking at this from KU's perspective, I think I would want to throw it. Because that's probably where the Cowboys are the most inexperienced on defense. And they've got some fresh middle linebackers too. Nick Martin, who I think has probably been their MVP through the first 5 weeks, or at 5 games anyway. He has really stepped up for, I believe, a guy who's only a redshirt freshman or sophomore maybe. But he has. But yeah, this defense has been confusing. It really has, for those reasons that you just said. It's like, man, we got, I don't even remember what it was, 200 plus put up on us by South Alabama's run game. And it's like, what just happened?
Yeah.
They looked fine throughout the first couple of weeks, and then that happened. And then, I kind of mentioned it earlier. They went up to Ames, and Iowa State had just scored 7 points the week before against Ohio. Not Ohio State, just Ohio. And you were like, okay, this is a get-right game for the Cowboys defense. Just got blown out by South Alabama. This is the chance. And they gave up 34 to the Cyclones. And exactly,
and they were successful on the ground.
No. And that was the thing. It was like, okay, Rocco Becht threw for 348, was named the National Freshman of the Week. It was like, this guy had, maybe that combined entering that game. I'm being facetious and making that up, obviously. But, Rocco Becht hadn't looked like the star that Oklahoma State made him look like. And then they completely, stymie Will Howard. And so it was like, okay, what version of this defense are we going to get on a weekly basis? I think this week in particular will be their biggest test until they play OU here on November 4th. But so I really think this is a big week for the Cowboys to get tested.
Yeah, it's just like we both just said, it's just weird because you talked about Will Howard kind of at the top of the show where he really struggled in Stillwater Friday night. It kind of looked like freshman year Will Howard, where Will was great last year. He's been good this year. They obviously won the Big 12 title with him. I think he's a good quarterback. But then K-State was still pretty mildly successful on the ground, which a lot of that came from a long run from Will Howard. But just really confused on Oklahoma State's defense. Is there any key names that we need to know on the defense? I guess you can touch on all position groups.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, secondary, D-line, up front, front seven.
So I've got an interesting tidbit on the Will Howard thing before I kind of dive into that. So I dug quite a bit this week because I was like, man, Will Howard completed less than half his passes, had less than 200 yards, had 3 touchdowns. That doesn't happen too often. And so Quinn Ewers actually completed less than half his passes and had 3 touchdowns versus OSU last year, but he threw for 310. And so it was so the last quarterback to throw for under 200 yards, complete less than half their passes, and throw 3 interceptions against OSU was Trevon Boykin in 2013.
TCU?
Like TCU, baby.
Yeah.
So just,
That's
that's
wild.
like historically what they were able to do against Will Howard last week. Like turn the quarterback of the reigning Big 12 champs into a non-factor. And it was like, what? Guys who had a big part to do with that, and guys who, will probably have a big part to do with the Cowboys defensive scheme this week in Stillwater. Kendall Daniels, again, they moved to that 3-3-5. He kind of plays that rover. I guess in some instances, people who follow the NFL closely would know it as probably that like Jalen Ramsey star role that the Rams came up with, where he just, wherever he's needed. You need him in man, cool. You need him to cover it, you need him to fill a zone, cool. Quarterback spy, they'll do it. Rush, that too. So Kendall Daniels, reigning Big 12 defensive freshman of the year. That's the name to watch on this defense. The other one, Colin Oliver. People are probably, quite familiar with him. Still settling in, as weird as that is to say. He was defensive end, and now he plays more of that like hybrid edge role that we've all grown accustomed to. You see guys like Von Miller, they're a stand-up linebacker, and at the snap they could drop back into the flat. That's kind of what this defense has done with Colin Oliver. But those two guys for sure, and then Nick Martin in the middle of the defense, a guy who's stepped up and really hasn't looked back since.
Is there any certain aspect on either side of the ball where you think Oklahoma State can kind of maybe not expose KU, but can kind of get them?
Offensively, it would have to be, you have to try and establish the run, right? Mm-hmm. Like just because you're going to throw against that secondary. Okay. That secondary does not get torched very often. I don't know what numbers were put up on him against Texas, but yeah, I just, that secondary with Kobe Bryant and back there does not get, big numbers put up on him very often. And so I would assume you try to plays right into OSU's philosophy, try and establish the run, try to get Ollie Gordon going early. Defensively, I think, again, what you had mentioned, I think they're probably going to try and simulate pressure. Really, really flustered Will Howard last week. That's a big part of why he had the game he did. They were able to have bodies on him, around him, nearly every play. And so I think they'll probably try to do the same thing with Jason Beans, speed him up a little bit, speed kind of their backfield operation up a little bit. But I mean, if it was easy to slow down Kansas's rushing attack, they wouldn't be number 6 in the country right now.
Yeah. So I want to get into a little more and then game predictions, but let's take one quick last break and then we'll get to that.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
I guess before game predictions, is there anything we should know about just Oklahoma State from a personnel standpoint, whether it's offense, defense, special teams? Is there any great things, anything that I guess KU fans should be giddy about? I guess just tell us a little more about Oklahoma State.
Yeah, kind of the thing that moving to the 3-3-5 has allowed OSU to go back to like a true nose tackle on defense. And so we talked about a big part of them for their defensive approach should, hopefully will be, for their sake, trying to slow down the run. Now, how successful you'll be in that, good luck. But they went out and got a couple of nose tackles, had one on the roster, kind of converted him from defensive tackle to nose, Colin Clay, and Justin Kirkland, a guy from Utah Tech, went on a mission trip, I believe. So last year, he graduated in like 19, but last year was his freshman year of college football. So he was at Utah Tech. He's like 6'4", 346 pounds. And so, just a wrecking ball in terms of mass in the middle of the defensive line of scrimmage for OSU. That in turn, has kind of allowed them to when they go in some of those four fronts, that's a lot of mass between Colin Clay and Justin Kirkland right there in the middle. So I imagine, KU fans can expect to see a lot of them right there in the trenches for OSU's defense. otherwise, offensively, we kind of talked about it. I think Brennan Presley is going to be a focal point. OSU had 75 snaps against K-State, and Brennan Presley was in motion for 25 of them. So whether it's they're doing that to get him the ball in some instances, they'll run like the zig motion, and it's essentially counter. They're giving it to him on a bubble out of the backfield. Whether it be, again, trying to throw the defense off. We know we're running a play with Ollie Gordon to the right. We're going to motion Brennan to the left and try to get the linebackers to flow a little bit. Those are probably the two things. I think maybe OSU's more personnel suited to stop the run than a year ago in Lawrence. But again, that's not me saying that they're going to slow down Kansas. I think Kansas's offense is really, really good at what they do. And Jason Bean's shown that he's a serviceable fill-in for the preseason Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, Jalen Daniels. But then offensively for the Pokes, expect a heavy dose of Brennan Presley, whether he has the ball or not. You're going to see a lot out of him, I'd imagine.
Are you allowed to talk gambling at all?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. One of our sponsors, DraftKings, I was just looking at the book, and they have it at, I think it opened around plus or minus 3.5 Kansas. It's down to -3. KU's a 3-point favorite. The over-under is 56, which I don't know how I feel about that, because I think both teams are going to try to pound it on the ground. If you had to, I guess, pick a favorite bet or pick a side, what side would you take for this game on Saturday?
I'm gonna go the under. I fear that one could bite me, because of course it would just seem right for this game to be a shootout, right? Like in the 40, of course it would. I'm gonna go the under. For the spread, that's tough. I'm gonna take Kansas 3. Yeah, I'm gonna take Kansas.
Yeah, down to 3. It was the total was up to 58.5 or 59, so it's moved 3 points, which I kind of had a feeling that would happen. And I think the only way it could really go over is just guys, Ollie Gordon, Devin Neal, and those guys just busting runs. I don't see really either offense beating secondaries over the top. But I like the under still at 56, and I like KU at -3, but I still think a really good coach and Gundy. You're at home getting a field goal, so I think it really could go either way. But it's wild. I don't know if you know this, but KU, if they win on Saturday, it'll be the second.
I saw this
in program history that they've went bowling in back-to-back years, and they obviously beat Oklahoma State last year to go bowling, and this year it could be the same. So it'll be a huge day in Stillwater. I don't know. There's a lot of KU fans going down, so I guess if you have any suggestions or any places that they should stop by, or what the tailgating experience is like, go ahead and shout those out.
So I've got a couple of things. I've got to redeem myself from last year. I was like 4 games into the beat, okay? Like I joined OSU mid-season and made the trip to Lawrence, and I tweeted right as the game ended, like, the goalposts are coming down, oh my, okay? And a lot of people quote tweeted that, and they were like, oh, you're fun at parties. Like, oh my, what do you mean, oh my? But I grew up in the Kansas City area. And so I've had, KU was kind of in my backyard. And so I'd seen the struggles firsthand. And the oh my that people kind of blew up over, I was just saying like, oh my to the anarchy, not oh my KU celebrating. So now that the air is clear on that.
That's social media. People take them the way they want to take them.
That's okay. That's okay. I was happy for the Jayhawks. I hope they go bowling again this year. I'd love to have and watch have an up close look in some instances like this weekend, and certainly watch from afar what Lance Leipold has done at KU. I mean, it's ridiculous in this short of amount of time, right? But anybody coming out of Stilly this weekend, I think the thing that people told me when I first moved down here is the thing that I'll relay along. Eskimo Joe's. They're like famous for their cheese fries. Have like do you guys have an Eskimo Joe's?
No. I went in like 2013 when Andrew Wiggins and Joel Embiid were fresh. Basketball game, but it's just funny because everyone says to go there. It was fun. cool atmosphere.
Yeah. So I go to Eskimo Joe's. I get cheese fries. You can put just about anything you can imagine on them. Sweet pepper bacon is my go-to. So that's, if anybody needs the personal rec. Otherwise, the tailgating scene, it's a lot better, I think, this year than maybe it was last year. I get to the games pretty early, and so I truthfully have no clue. But I know from the media lot is probably like a quarter mile away. From the media parking to the stadium entrance for credentialed people, you see quite a few of them. I think I see more than I did last year. OSU just announced today that like all 7 home games are sold out for the year. Obviously, some of them already happened, but like they host KU this weekend, obviously, Cincinnati in a couple of weeks for homecoming. And then they host Bedlam, of course, and BYU for the regular season finale. Those were all already sold out. And so I that's nuts for a team that was, 2-2 a week ago, is 3-2 right now. So yeah, anybody coming down, go to Eskimo Joe's, walk across the street. You'll probably have, a hell of a tailgate experience, I'd imagine. And that just seems like one of those games where you're going to need a couple.
Yeah. I think it could be a stressful one. And KU's obviously trying to go bowling and try to prove that they're one of the best teams in the conference. So yeah, this was great. Obviously, I have so much respect for Tucker. He's one of my favorite people in the world. And when I said to you, I had to do it. I wasn't going to reach out to anyone else. I love him so much. So I really appreciate you coming on, man. This was great. And I can't wait to talk to you about, I guess, Oklahoma State, KU hoops in the future.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again. Thanks for Tucker. But more importantly, thanks for having me on. We'll do it again. And I don't know when they play mid-January or something like that. So we'll do it all again in a couple of months.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I'll hopefully see you in Stillwater this weekend.
Yes, sir.